get the pool
Make
first.
sure you get one of those sign-in sheets before you leave, so we can let your agent know you were here, so you get the time for that. And then if you need paper and pen, Miss Julie's got those that she can give you.
All right, you guys ready?
Yeah.
I now understand
Louder.
how loud I really am, yeah. But I kind of get a feeling like my priest, Father Tom. Everybody's at the back. But we'll make it work there. So it's good to be here this evening. You guys are stop number 3 for me today. I had to be in Pulaski County to look at their hams. I was in Adair County to look at their hams, and now I'm here tonight to talk about hams here in Bowling Green. And so a lot of folks ask me, said, how do we find the speech topics? Well, they're here. They're also on the contract you guys signed as well. So juniors, so if you were born between 2011 and 2015, you juniors, your topic is, we adjusting the volume there?
Yeah, as you realize.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. I don't really need a microphone, but they're trying to catch it on the.
Are you B1 or B2?
I am
Look on the back, it should be somewhere.
B2. All right.
Is that better?
That sounds a little bit better, right? I'm blasting everybody's ears out. All right, so juniors, your topic is steps to curing a country ham. Should be fairly easy since you did it just a few months ago. And seniors, if you're born between 2006 and 2011, your topic is design a country ham curing facility for your county's ham project. So we'll break these down. We'll do the junior topic first, and then we'll talk about the senior topic here second. So this is what happens. A few of you parents have come up to me and said, okay, how does this go off at the state fair? All right? Because like I said earlier, we have almost 1,100 individuals. All right, 1,100 kids. Now, chances are we'll only have around 1,000 at state fair because there's always forfeits and so on and so forth. So 1,000 kids on the opening day of the state fair descend upon Louisville, followed by parents and so on and so forth. And so one of the things that we have done that we kept from the pandemic. So when the pandemic happened, we realized that we can't have 1,000 people on the second floor of the South Wing at once, all right? So now we kind of assign signing times for each county. Sometimes it goes alphabetical, sometimes it goes random, sometimes it goes, those counties that are farthest away from Louisville go later in the morning and afternoon versus those that are closest. So it varies. Your county agent will know which check-in time to have. We are in the South Wing, all right? Your hams are checked in the day before, that Wednesday, in the Cloverville. And Cloverville is also in the South Wing as well, but it's on the first floor, all right? So the speeches happen on the second floor, and you'll sign in, your counties will sign in, you'll get a sticker that says this is where I go. You'll start to get some time slots when you're going to give your speech. And then when you go to give your speech, this is what kind of creeps people out, all right? When somebody says you got to give a speech, you're envisioning you standing in front of 1,000 other kids giving your speech. When in reality, you're in a curtained cubicle in a great big room, and you're standing in front of 2 judges, okay? So it's not that big of a deal. All right, and you have 3 to 5 minutes to give your speech. So, now in the old days, when I first took the project over almost 20 years ago, 19 years ago, we gave speeches anywhere and everywhere we could get space. But now they got us in the South Wing. Senior topic, all right, this is the only time that we allow you to have a visual aid. So you seniors, okay, you can have a visual aid, a poster board, to kind of illustrate what you're going to design your facility to be. Traditional poster board, all right? No billboard. And believe it or not, I've already had questions, can they be 3-dimensional? No, just one sheet, okay? Just one sheet. So here's some tips for those of you that have the world's greatest fear, and that's talking in front of people. Stay calm. It's only two people you're talking in front of. All right? I know you're going to be pretty nervous that day. Remember to pronounce your words. All right? Does that make sense? For example, when I say pronounce your words, tell me what this word is. B-E-C-A-U-S-E. It's because, right? How do normal people say it? Because. B-E-C-U-Z. Okay? You hear a lot of people say, oh, because, that kind of stuff. I realize we all have accents and so on and so forth. Our vernacular is a little bit different. But be cognizant of pronouncing your words. Slow down. Slow down. My daughter is a sophomore in high school. And she had to give a speech. And she practiced her speech. And she says, I've got it to where I can say it in 3 minutes. Cool. She got in front of the class, said it in 2.5 minutes. So you're going to speak faster when you do this. So remember, keep calm, all right? And slow down. Here's the other one. The one thing you don't want to do, so this is my 2 judges right here. You don't want to give your speech like this. You've got to make eye contact, all right? And I know what people say. Pick a spot just above them, their heads, and look at that. So you're giving your speech like this, and that's really creepy. Versus if you're just staring at them, that makes people uncomfortable if you stare at them. So just make casual eye contact, all right? Let them know, the judges know that you're used to doing this kind of stuff. And stay still. Now, you're going to see me wander around this room quite a bit, and that's just a habit I have. But when you're giving your speech there, try to stay still. And if for some reason you cannot stay still, kind of put one foot in front of the other. That locks you in place. All right? Now, here's another thing. So we all have accents, right? I didn't know I had an accent until I moved to Kentucky. I'm originally from Illinois, from the Midwest. All right? It's a great time to be from Illinois. Our new Pope is from Illinois, which I think is interesting. He's from Chicago. If you guys haven't, you're not Catholic like me, you don't know that he's from Chicago. All right? Which I think is interesting. Chicago got a Pope before they got a quarterback that could throw 4,000 yards. All right? I just think that's interesting. But those of us, now that we have a Midwestern Pope, we are pushing to make it a mortal sin to put ketchup on a bratwurst. That's what we're pushing. All right? I guess that joke only works if you're in the Midwest. All right? So, but at any rate, so being from the Midwest, being from Illinois, I cannot talk if you tie my hands together. I have to have my hands to talk. You're going to see me doing this all along. If for some reason you're like me, try to be conscious about that and limit it, all right? I know everybody kind of talks with their hands, but don't get too boisterous about that when you're talking with your hands. So just some tips and some things we got to think about as well, all right? So let's get to talking about steps to curing a country ham. You know this, you just don't realize you know it. I'm going to help you fill in the gaps, all right? So let's just start at the very beginning, all right? Just like it was said earlier, we have almost 1,100 kids in this project. We're divided between smoked and non-smoked, all right? The smoked division is smaller than the non-smoked division. And the way they cure their hams is a little bit different as well. I'm going to be leaning a little bit more towards the bag cure method than I am the salt box method. Chances are your guys' hams are being cured by the salt box method. All right? It's a little bit more labor intensive, all right, than the bag method. So I'm going to give you a little bit of both here, all right? So for example, we need to get started, and this is where you've got to be a little familiar with some terminology we use in the meats industry. For example, a green ham, all right? A green ham is the phraseology in the meats industry, that's what I can call it. In the meats industry, we use for an uncured hind leg of a pig. That's a green ham. All right? Please do not be the brand new 4-H agent I had a few years ago that called me up in a panic, and she said, something's wrong. So what's going on? She says, something is wrong with our hams. So, okay, what's wrong? You told us we need to start with a green ham. Yes. These are pink. Okay? You can't make this stuff up. All right? Just that's the terminology that we use, a green ham. And normally when we start this project, we always start with a ham that's fairly fresh. When I say fairly fresh, they're only about 48 hours old. All right? So that means 72 hours ago, it was being used. 48 hours ago, we talked them out of it, and now it's your ham. All right? The fresher the ham, the higher the quality the end product is going to be. Now, does this mean that I have to have an absolute fresh ham to cure and make a country ham? No. You can do them with older hams. You just got to be careful that the skin needs to stay soft. All right? So by the time you guys get your hams, they're about 48 hours old. Skin needs to be soft so we can get this cure to stick to the outside of it as well. Okay? So that's how we get started. Now, we're going to need a ham. We're going to need cure. We got to have a saw. Now, if we're doing the bag method, we got to have waxless paper. And even for you guys in the box cure method in the smoke division, you have to have what's called a ham sock. Okay? Now, this is a very, very basic cure mixture. Chances are your cure mixture had this as the base, but things were added to it. Okay? So, 100 pounds of ham can be cured with about 8 pounds of salt, 2 pounds of brown sugar, some black and red pepper. Now, what I've seen some ham cures the professional guys do, for example, if you go to Clifty, which I think you went to Clifty, right? They use more white sugar than they use brown sugar. All right?
They did once. So right
They
now
did once,
They
okay.
did once. Right now their hams, they packed them in cure mix and they're sitting in the vats in the cold temperatures.
Okay.
They go back in June.
They go back. You guys go back in June. Okay. So in the old days with the with the unsmoked division, we got our stuff from Finchville Farms, and they used brown sugar. This year we got our cure from Clifty Farms. All right. Finchville closed and shuttered their operation, and so we ended up for the unsmoked division. We ended up using 6 tons of cure, 2 semis of hams. It was 4 degrees outside. It was cold. It was cold that morning. All right, but this is a very basic one, okay? Very basic one. You'll see them kind of go back and forth. And if you want to, at the end, we can talk about how they go back and forth on the cure. All right, so preparing your hams. Now, I'm assuming that your hams came in and have what we call a long hock, all right? Meaning that because the packer will cut those hams with hocks that are really long, adds a little bit more weight to the ham so they can charge more for them. But we need to cut that hock off, all right? Usually we cut it to where we have about 2 inches of hock on here. So this is called the heel of the ham, all right? Here's the hock. And we want to leave that hock around 2 inches from where we cut it to the bottom part of that heel there, all right? You can see this individual is using a hand saw, all right? Some people will use a band saw, although we just don't really like letting kids your age use band saws, all right? They're wonderful tools. They just don't know the difference between meat and bones and meat and fingers and that kind of stuff. So we don't want anybody to get hurt there, all right? And you're also going to see it's a little bit tough in the way the PowerPoint did this picture here. There's some loose skin and stuff on there as well. There is a wad of fat and a muscle called the flank muscle over here that I usually suggest people take off. If they don't take it off, it's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. But you may have to do a little bit of trimming of some loose skin and some loose fat that's on there. Now you got to be extremely careful because we started out in January with in the unsmoked division. We started out with 25 to 27, 28 pound hams. Some of those hams are over 30 pounds. Okay, They were huge. They're about the size of a 3-year-old. All right? The hams I saw today are about half that size now. They have shrunk that much. All right? So we need to be careful when we start trimming on there, because that ham's going to shrink up. By the time you get to the state fair, it's about third the size it was in January, or third the size it was when you guys started as well. So you got to be careful with that, because I've seen people say it looked really good in January when we trimmed it up, but it just started shrinking in different directions. So you got to be very, very careful when you start trimming those hams up. All right, applying the cure. All right. I'm going to attack this from the bag cure method, the unsmoked method, then help you guys out with what you guys do in your box cure method. So this is pretty simple, all right? 25-pound ham. If that 10 pounds of cure, remember that 10-pound cure mixture? If I need 10 pounds of that to cure 100 pounds of ham, how much of that 10-pound mixture do I need to cure a 25-pound ham? Easy math, right? 2.5 pounds. So you got to put 2.5 pounds of that cure on that ham. Now, I'm assuming everybody in this room cured their own hams, right? Yeah? There's a few of you going yes and no, and a few of you looking at your parents like,
You cured your own hair, walk your clip, you wash it, you massage all
Yeah.
the salt, sugar, cure,
some of you kids looked at your parents like they were your lawyer in court. Should I answer that or not? We need to plead the fifth. I bet you learned a valuable lesson, you newbies. All right? Your hands are covered in that cure. Did you learn the lesson by not doing this? Or doing this? Yeah, you need to be careful of that. I don't know how many phone calls from angry parents I got on that. But you need to make sure you get it covered everywhere. Now, this picture up here is showing that hock. All right? So, back in that hock, it's going to make what's called the stifle joint. It's kind of the knee, so to speak, up in that ham. We need to make sure we get enough cure up into that hock that it cures that hock all the way up to that stifle joint. All right? Because there's a lot of skin hanging around that stifle joint. It's a little bit more challenging for the cure to migrate its way back towards that stifle joint. If a ham goes bad, 9 times out of 10, it goes bad in that stifle joint, which is back over here, all right? And the ham's bad. It's because they didn't get enough cure in there. So usually I tell folks, about the time you think you've got enough cure in the hock, put a little bit more. All right? Put a little more. And rub it all over the ham. Now this is where things change from what you guys did and what your unsmoked friends did. All right? The unsmoked friends are going to utilize this right here. This is the bag method that comes into play. This is a throwback to what used to happen when we went to a grocery store. All right? Parents, help me out. When you went to a grocery store and they bagged your groceries, they put it in a paper bag. All right? Now they put it in a plastic bag. And I have been teasing Walmart, I've been teasing Kroger. I can save them millions of dollars a year if they train their people to put more than one thing in a plastic bag. All right? My wife said, well, that's good because we need those bags at our house. Because that's what we use to clean the litter box with. We're not raising mountain lions. We don't need a 4-foot tall box full of plastic bags. But that's where this comes into play, is those days when you get all those paper bags when you go to the grocery store. Now, with that being said, there's been some folks that gets creative with that, and they call me up and say, can I use a feed bag? Meaning some livestock feed was in there. You could, but it's just your ham's going to smell and taste like what was in that feed bag. My favorite is when they call me up and they say, can I use an old fertilizer bag? It's paper. You sure can if you want to die. Yeah. You can't do that kind of stuff. Here, instead of using an actual paper bag, we're going to use this waxless paper that I talked about earlier. And this is where it basically comes in a great big rectangle. You turn it into kind of a diamond. You take the bottom part, put it over the hock, one side, top, the other side. Put a little bit of tape on there to secure that paper, and you're ready to go and put it in the sock, all right? You're probably gonna go back this June and take your hams and put them in a brand new sock. That's what that is right there. That's called a ham sock, all right? And a lot of times when we start out in January with the unsmoked division, that sock is kind of tough to get on there because we order them just a touch too small because we're trying to create a girdle effect. And what we're trying to do is get the ham to start forming that nice kind of plump teardrop shape. And this is where it all begins, is when we put that ham in that ham sock, all right? There's a seam at the bottom of that ham sock. It needs to go straight over that hock. Pull it up, yank it down to where it sits, to where the hock is pointed down, all right? Now, what happens if you put the butt face? So what we have at the top here, what if we put it at the bottom? Well, then your hams are going to have kind of a bullet missile shape. Is there anything wrong with that? No. All right? When I go back to the Missouri State Fair and I help judge their country ham show, that's how they do it in Missouri. All right? We in Kentucky do it like a teardrop. Missouri does it like a bullet. There's nothing wrong. It's just, to me, it looks better as a teardrop than it does a bullet. Okay? Now, what's going on with your hams, all right, and now I believe, ironically enough, this is actually a picture from Clifty Farms several years ago. Yours is doing the box cure, all right? So you put all you massage all that cure into your hams, and they put them in these boxes. And then what you probably don't realize is what Clifty Farms is going to do is come in about a week or 2 weeks later, and they're going to move them. All these hams are at the top, are now going to be at the bottom. They may give them a little bit more cure if they need to, and they'll keep doing that throughout the entire curing time. They'll move them around, all right? Now, this is where you can tell the difference between the box-cured hams and the bag-cured hams. Yours are kind of flat, whereas the bag-cures are kind of plump on the top, all right? Nothing wrong with either one of them, all right? So, what's happening to your hams right now? All right? What's happening to your hams right now? So, that salt and that sugar is penetrating the ham. All right? And in the process of penetrating the ham, they're forcing the water out. All right? People always ask me, how come country hams don't need to be refrigerated? It's because all life needs water. And here's a situation where we force the water out of those hams. So if there's no water, bacteria can't survive. So basically we created a bacterial desert, all right? And so that's why it's important on these tubs here that they're using for the box cure methods at Clifty Farms. There's big holes underneath there because they want the moisture to get away from. This is why it's important for the unsmoked group when they're doing the bag cure method. They use a waxless paper so that the moisture can escape. All right? That's why this is called dry cure. We want the moisture to escape. And so all that what's happening right now to your hams is that salt and sugar is penetrating that ham, forcing that moisture out. Now the pepper that's in there, and even your cure has some pepper in there, it usually stays on the surface and it helps with color and so on and so forth. All right? This process of the cure and the sugar, the salt and sugar penetrating the ham, forcing the water out. This is what we call the curing method, the curing process. So for a bag cured ham, we usually calculate 2 days for every 1 pound of ham. So a 25-pound ham takes about 25 days. For your hams, we usually calculate 1 inch per week. So if your hams are about 7 inches thick, it's going to take 7 weeks to cure your ham. All right? In that time, they must stay cold. They must stay refrigerated. All right? This is the luxury you have that the unsmoked group doesn't have. All right? So in the unsmoked group, we start in January. Like I said, it was 4 degrees when we started on the morning of Martin Luther King Day. 4 degrees. 2 weeks later, it's 50. So it got warm, and people got nervous, and I got nervous. This happens every year. Because we are, in the unsmoked group, we are allowing Mother Nature to dictate our refrigeration. Now, we've done some things to kind of help Mother Nature along, and I'll cover those here in a second. But you, with your families at Clifty Farms, they're sitting in a refrigerated room. So even though it's almost 80 degrees outside today, your hams are going through that curing process. The way they can do that is because they're in a refrigerated room. All right? So that's why a lot of the professional guys have gone to curing in these rooms, because Mother Nature in January and February does not always cooperate and keeps things cold. All right? Now, the unsmoked group, right? Their hams are cured. They got through the curing process about the beginning of March to the middle part of March. All right? They're now going through what we call the springtime, or the salt equalization. That's when your guys are going to do that in June. So that Clifty Farms is going to move them from what they sometimes refer to as the winter room and put them in the spring room. This is where we raise the temperature up to around 55 degrees or so, 55 degrees. And what's happening is, so for the last 50 days, the salt and sugar's done everything they could to penetrate the ham, raise the temperature of those hams, and they start to equilibrate throughout the entire ham. So years ago, I had a grad student who was interested in this, and it was really kind of neat. He actually measured the salt concentration of each of the muscles inside those hams throughout the curing process. And it showed that this big muscle up here on top, it had about 7% salt. The ones below it only had about 2% salt. We want them all to have at least 4% salt. But after the salt equalization, it kind of equaled out, where they were all about 4% salt. Okay? So that usually goes on for about 30 days or so. All right? Now, a term we call shucking the ham is what we use in the non-smoke group, where they go in there, take the paper off, they take the old stock off. Some of them will wash their ham. So, for example, I told you I stopped at Pulaski County today. They washed their hams, started on Friday, but then they were so rudely interrupted by a big weather event that came through there. All right, I didn't see any storm damage. I didn't see any tornado damage. As I was coming down I-75, I veered off at Mount Vernon and went down to Somerset that way. I didn't go into London. All right, and where the extension office is there in Somerset, I didn't see any tornado damage. So, question?
I mean, like, and also, because like on the same day of the tornado outbreak, our house, Fountain Road, which is the town which we live in, got a tornado warning, which means the tornado signs were going off.
Oh yeah, yeah. I live out in the country. We have the tornado sirens, but you have to be outside to hear them. All right, so I stayed up about midnight watching hockey, waiting for the tornado siren. I didn't hear anything, but we woke up Saturday morning and it was sad to hear what had happened. So, shucking the hams. So they shucked their hams, they washed them, put a brand new ham stock on them, got them back into the cooler, or back into the ham house, and so they're ready for salt equalization. They've already gone through a little bit of it. Then next month, when the weather gets warmer, kind of same what happens with yours as well, is they can get moved to a summer room. And we call this the summer sweat, or aging. All right? Usually for you that are smoked, after salt equalization, this is when your hams get smoked. And they can be smoked for 12 hours, they can be smoked for an entire 24-hour period. I forget how Clifty Farms does their hams, all right? And so that smoking not only gives it different flavor, gives it different color, gives it different aroma as well. Now for the unsmoked hams, all right, they just go into the summer sweat. As soon as yours comes out of the smokehouse, they're going into the summer sweat as well. And this is where they get that characteristic country ham flavor and aroma. And so for the unsmoked division, by the time the state fair rolls around, those are 9-month-old hams. All right? So they're pretty intense when it comes to saltiness. All right? if you're not used to a country ham, all you're going to taste is the salt. Yours are around a 6-month-old ham, so you're not going to have that intensity of salt as the others will. Now, they will still continue to lose moisture. When they lose moisture, that salt concentration is going to be increased as well. So, your hams rolling into the state fair, I would say your hams probably have a salt concentration around 4.5% to 5%. The unsmoked hams have a salt concentration somewhere around 6 to 7%. Okay? So a little bit higher than you guys, because they're older hams. All right, so August rolls around. Time to get your ham ready for the state fair. And these hams have been through a lot. All right, they've been through a lot. They're a little dirty. They got some excess cure on them. You need to get in there and clean the little cracks and crevices and so on and so forth. And you need to make sure you get them clean as possible. All right? And then let them dry. And you can put a small, tiny amount of oil on there to enhance the color. All right? What is too much oil? Too much oil is when you can't pick the ham up. All right? Too much oil is when you finally do pick the ham up, there is a greasy spot on the table. That was probably enough oil to do an entire county, probably a whole district. All right? Doesn't need much. You're just trying to enhance the color. All right, questions on steps in curing a country ham for you juniors?
How many juniors is in here? How many 9 to 13-year-olds in here?
Oh, you're quite a few. So basically, you guys are just going to talk about what you did. You got 3 minutes to talk about what you did.
So the Clifty Farms, that's the salt box.
That's the salt box cure, yeah. So at Clifty Farm, what you guys do is the salt box cure.
All your names are here by seniors in here. I know about Tori first.
One,
Seniors on the names up.
2, 3, 4. Okay. This is for you guys then. This is where, for the seniors, all right, so this is how the ham committee picks topics. We usually try to do the junior topic on something that you need to know. Yep.
So on the minutes.
Yep.
For your
For your speech? Yeah.
Do you have to have exactly 3 or 5?
No.
Or it could be in between.
Yeah, it could be 4 minutes, be 3.5 minutes, just as long as you don't go over 5 and you get her up to 3. Yep. Good question. Good question. So for example, junior topics, stuff you need to know, how to cure a country ham, how to cook a country ham, and so on and so forth. Seniors, we try to challenge you a little bit, and this is where we challenge you to design a country ham curing facility for your county's ham project. And so this is where you can let your imagination go wild, okay? So this is, like I said earlier, this is the only topic we allow you to have a visual aid. You can use a poster board, traditional size poster board, not 3-dimensional poster board. No, you cannot dress up either. I had that question a few years ago, all right? When I say dress up, do not come to the state fair dressed as a ham. Okay? That was a question about 3 or 4 years ago. Again, you can't make this stuff up. Now, what I want you to realize, all right?
Juniors, also, let me tell you,
Yeah.
I've been an agent for several years. You will get this topic at some point as your junior or as a senior. So
Yeah,
not only
yeah.
this, this will keep you ahead of the game.
Yeah, we rotate about a dozen of these topics. So you guys will have it. Money is no object, all right? So you're like Bill Gates. Elon Musk, that type. Mark Zuckerberg. Money's no object. So don't say, well, how much money we got to play with? When money's no object, sky's the limit. Use your imagination, all right? So think about where you're going to put your ham house, all right? There's 2 places that we have ham houses. At the extension office, or sometimes we have it at volunteers' property. Okay? We do have a couple of those that are out there. Things you'll want to avoid. Putting your ham house on blacktop or the parking lot. If you think this is not that big of a deal, I will refer to you to Adair County's 4-H agent, Mr. Tony Rose, who one year had his ham house on the blacktop, and man, his hams looked phenomenal. They did really well. The next year he had them on the blacktop, and we sat there all afternoon throwing hams away because they spoiled. They got too hot. Okay? So you want to avoid it. You want to avoid high traffic areas. All right? You want to avoid high traffic areas. What I'm getting at is you don't want people always wonder what's in that barn and they try to open it up. All right? You also want to put it to a place where kind of protected from animals as well. All right? That's going to be a challenge. That's going to be a challenge. You don't want it to be open to the public either. For example, a few years ago, Woodford County, they had somebody break in there and steal some of their hams. Okay? My favorite story, and again, you cannot make this up. One of the southeastern Kentucky counties called me up and said, "We've lost our hams, we need more hams." And at that time, I used to keep about 50 extra hams at Finchville. Now I've got about 50 extra hams throughout the state. Went to Finchville, got those hams that we needed, drove all the way down to Letcher County, and they said, we lost all of our hams this week. I said, "What happened?" And they said, "You've got to see this." I went out to their ham house, huge claw marks all over the ham house. Front doors were ripped off. 2 black bear ate 20 some odd hams over the weekend. So, that's a lot of salt. That's a lot of salt. I bet they were thirsty as well, yeah. And as always, and we've had this problem happen in the past, a flood area. All right, want to avoid a flood area. We had that in Breathitt County a few years ago where they flooded really bad in quicksand and hams were flooded. I hesitate to say I've seen it all. We've lost hams to tornadoes before. All right. So, for example, when West Liberty got hit with the tornado, it's funny now, but at the time it was a little sad. They were, through the rubble of the tornado, they had these long pikes and they were shoving into the debris, looking for soft spots. They'd find a soft spot, thinking there was a body underneath there, and they'd go tear it in there, and it was just a 4-H'er's ham. They got one across the hand. We've had them get struck by lightning before. Washington County's ham house was struck by lightning one time, and she said it exploded, and I didn't realize when she said exploded, it legitimately exploded. It got hit by lightning, and it was, I think, 80 feet away. There were parts of hams and building and everything else. So, not that you have to kind of think about those kind of things, it's just kind of fun to talk about that stuff, all right? So, your building can be pretty simple. All right, so what some counties do is they'll go to Lowe's or Home Depot or the local lumber yard, and they will just buy an outdoor building and retrofit it. All right, here's some of the ones I've heard in the past. All right, somebody said they were going to shed. Let me try that again. They were going to design their ham house to be shaped like a country ham. That was pretty clever. They were going to do it like a log cabin. Yeah. Others were doing a brick building because they thought this, and this was a lot of thought. I thought this was really cool. They wanted theirs to be a brick building because the extension office was brick and they wanted it to blend in with the brick. I thought that was a pretty cool thing to think about for a senior topic. So just use your imagination on this, all right? So this is Mercer County's ham house. Pretty simple. Pretty simple, all right? Outdoor shed that they retrofitted. Here's Shelby County's a little bit taller, so they do 3 layers, whereas the others do 2 layers of ham. A little bit taller. Now you can see they've got things kind of retrofitted, which we're going to talk about here in a second. All right. So things you need to retrofit, modifications you need to make to your ham house. You need to think about how you're going to hang your hams. All right. Need to think about electricity. You need electricity not only for lights, but you need it for fans, because some people have fans in their ham houses. Your floor. What's your floor going to be made of? A cool box. Remember I told you we are now not putting a whole lot of trust in Mother Nature to be cold in January and February. So a cool bot is a device you attach to a air conditioner, a window unit air conditioner, that overrides its thermostat. So most of your window air conditioners will only go down to 65 degrees. This thing will allow you to go down to 45 degrees. Okay? So it's called a cool bot. Okay? Insulation is a lot of times needed with a cool bot as well. All right? A door lock, keep people out, pest control. So let's talk about some of this, all right? So here's how you hang your hams, right? So this is a picture taken as you're standing at the door. And the beams to hang the hams is running parallel to the door. Looks pretty fishy, doesn't it? Yeah. You want to know the problem with that? You need to be Gumby to get in and out of there. All right? You got to bend and twist and everything else. So that's not a really good design. All right? We learned our lesson and we no longer design ham houses this way. So now a lot of them will do it perpendicular to the door. So this is a dare counter. All right? So you can see how it allows you to walk in between those hams. So when I was at Adair County this afternoon, we went out to the ham house. I could walk all the way to that back wall. And I have to duck under a bunch of hams and get all greasy and slimy and everything else from the hams hanging. All right? Easier to check your hams, easier to load them, easier to unload those hams as well. There's another one where they, instead of using wood, they put steel beams up in there. I believe this is Kenton County. But those steel beams that got these hooks that they hang the hams from. Things to think about. Things to think about.
What's at the very top of that ham house? Like, it looks like a
That,
pipe or a big, yeah, right there.
I'm not for sure. I don't remember what that is. It's not part of the ham design. So here's the other thing too. I'm glad you brought that up because it jarred something in my memory. All right. Your ham house has to be solely for what? Hams. Okay? The maintenance crew cannot store lawnmowers, weed eaters, barbecue grills, or anything like that in there. Because what happens when you store weed eaters and lawnmowers in there, guess what your hams are going to smell and taste like? Grass and weed eaters and fuel and so on and so forth. I'll never forget when I was in grad school at the University of Missouri, when I first started learning this country ham stuff, my professor sent me to Mexico, Missouri. Yes, there is a place in Missouri called Mexico, Missouri. I went down there to judge their county ham show. They had a really kind of a neat thing. I wasn't allowed to judge the ham until the kid was standing next to me. And you think, as a judge, that sounds a little kind of what? But they wanted the kid to understand why I was scoring the way I was scoring and asking questions. And I picked this ham up, and as soon as I picked it up, I got this whiff, and I thought, something's not right. And it clicked in my head what was going on, and I said, little boy was standing there, and I said, you kept this in the machine shed, didn't you? He said, what's the machine shed? I said, you kept it in the same barn where you keep your tractor, right? He said, yeah. He said, I kept it right above Dad's tractor so I could crawl up on the tractor and catch it, check it. So every time Dad fired up that diesel tractor, it got bathed in diesel smoke, and guess what it smelled like, right? So it's got to be dedicated solely to hams, okay? All right, your floors. Here's a nice plywood floor. Do you see a problem with plywood floors?
Moisture comes off the hands.
Yeah, moisture comes off the hands. What else is leached off those hands? NaCl. Salt. Yeah. You know how plywood is made? It's different layers. About 4 or 5 years is all it's going to have before it starts splitting. All right? But you don't have much money, that's what you're stuck with, all right? Here's Shelby County. They've got a concrete floor with a drain in the middle as well. What's cool is you can see where all the hams are made. Got concrete floor. Here's one where they, this was kind of a neat idea. At least I thought it was a neat idea. This was that plywood floor we talked about. And the county said, okay, this has got to last. So they put in stretched plastic above it. And then this picture is taken, they wet it down to get the air bubbles out. That's one way of making that wood last a little bit longer by putting that plastic over it as well. And then if worse comes worse, you can just do this. Just a gravel floor. There's several counties that have that. My home county in Madison County, they have a gravel floor. Woodford County has a gravel floor. So it works well. Works well. All right. We got to talk about airflow. Okay, because we got to dry these hams out. So airflow is important. All right. It gives us that color we're looking for, helps dry the surface. If we got good airflow, it can reduce the amount of mold that grows on these hams, and they will grow mold. And so in order to do this, you're going to need some floor vents, and you're going to need an exhaust fan. All right? So here it is, an example of floor vents. So what it's designed to do, there's actually kind of a step ahead of what we're talking about. There's an exhaust fan sitting up here. An exhaust fan is pointing out, so it's blowing out. And what it's doing is it's sucking the air in from the bottom, causing it to cascade over those hams and go out the top. Airflow is important. Okay? And here's another example of that. Now, you see the challenge with those vents? We figured that out? Chances are the bugs can crawl in there, right? Or mice. So you're going to have to put some mesh over that to keep the insects out. Here's that exhaust fan. Most people have these on a timer. And so it clicks on about 10 o'clock in the morning and shuts off about 6 o'clock in the afternoon or the evening. I mean, you can go out there physically and do it, but it's a lot easier if you have it on time. Others have a vent across the peak of the house, the ham house. This is Woodford County's. This one's got really good airflow. Yeah. Not sure why they put a door, but this is, believe it or not, this actually is a 4-H ham house as it's being constructed. All right? I just thought that was a funny thing to go in there. All right, other things. These are going to attract pests. All right? And so what I encourage the 4-H agents and the volunteers to do is to put these bait traps, or sometimes called a tin cat. So these are called tin cats, these are bait traps. Put them on the outside, and the mice will get in there. All right? Please do not do this. So one time we had a workshop, speech workshop, we had it on campus one day. And outside of our big lecture hall, B52, the big lecture hall. And all these kids are standing out there, and this brand new 4-H agent, she comes up to me and she has a ham in her hand, and she hands it to me and she points. What caused this? There was a hole in her ham about the size of a nickel. And I said, well, that's a mouse. Well, how do you know it's a mouse? Because he's looking at me. The words that came out of that young lady's mouth, I think, are hanging in space somewhere still. And let's put it this way. She probably needed to go to confession after some of the words she said in front of a bunch of 4-H kids. So don't do that. Don't do that. So that if you got those big box, even putting just simple spring-loaded mouse traps out there, they work as well. Always put them against vertical walls, because mice can't see very well, so they always run along vertical surfaces. So well, I saw one run across the room. He ran across the room because you scared him. When they're out hunting and gathering food, they run along vertical surfaces. So if you put your mouse trap there, you'll catch it, all right? Cover all the openings, like I said earlier. Those vents, they're gonna attract bugs and mice, okay? Caulk all the seams, keep little bitty things out of there. Try to keep things clean, all right? Clean up around there. Most of these folks, if you kind of notice, they had like a 2-foot dead zone around the ham house, okay? And check your ham house periodically, all right? I can't tell you how many times I'll get a phone call in the end of July and somebody saying, I think I got beetles, I got larder beetles. When they show up, I don't know, I haven't checked the ham house since March. Okay? Not a lot I can do to save the project. So check things periodically. All right, keep that grass trimmed and cut around there. Keep the doors locked, that keeps people out of there. Limit the access, meaning that not everybody needs to be in that ham house. Some folks will actually put in a wireless thermometer so they know what temperature it is outside. They'll make little walkways going up to it to make it so it doesn't look like just this barn out in the middle of nowhere. Others will put like Thompson water seal or whatever on the walls and on the floor as well. So I threw that up there. I thought that was pretty ingenious. Dragging along push mowers.
No,
No, don't think that's ingenious?
no, that's us.
See, I think that will make America great again, and that's hope and change you can count on. That's American ingenuity right there. It's a stupid idea.
Because if that lawnmower would have caught on the wheel, it would pop the wheel, and also it's unsafe.
Well, yeah, but everybody in the neighborhood's gonna talk about it though. All right, what questions do you have for me?
You had mentioned something earlier about dress as a joke, but we're brand new, so.
You're brand new?
How should the kids dress for their presentations?
Dress like professionally, I guess. Because if I remember right, help me out, there is points for dressing professionally. All right? So, shorts, flip-flops, tank top, no bueno. Okay? You know, don't dress like me. I mean, I am wearing UK blue, all right? I even got my C3PO socks on. I'm ready there. So, I dress professional. What else?
Can you mention to them just a little bit about mites? Because a lot of times we tell them to freeze them after
Yes.
the fair, but they may not have been exposed to those.
Yeah, so these guys will attract bugs, like I said earlier. Heard me mention larder beetles. They also get mites, and every year there's hams that show up to the fair, and they've got mites on them. And that I guess I didn't realize I was doing this, but I think I freaked out the agents because they'll see me in the hams, and I'll stop. And I'm just going, and what I'm doing is seeing if those little white dots start moving. And those are ham mites. And so that's why we tell you to, everybody just, on the safe side, just take them home and freeze them. And ham mites, they infect about 60% of our ham crop. They don't do anything to the ham. All right, it's just kind of creepy.
So you freeze them before?
No, freeze them when you bring them home, yeah. Yeah, just in case, you know, like I said, every year there's a few hams that show up with them on there, and we just tell everybody to freeze them, just, you know, safe stuff. Yep.
When did you first start getting interested in country hams?
When did I first get started interested in country ham? Basically, when I was in grad school in Missouri, so we're talking probably